Hello and welcome to 5-Minute Marketing by HOGO. Today we're going to be talking to Mr. Andrew Edsall, a seasoned problem solver who's worked with a variety of different firms in the past, including market research firms, as well as digital market research firms based in Tokyo. Andrew, if you don't mind, before we get into some of the meat of today's interview, first I want to say thank you very much for taking some time and talking with us. And I'd
Thanks very
also
much.
you are very welcome. And I'd like to, give you an opportunity to give the 1-minute elevator pitch on yourself. Can you give our audience a little bit of background and just some understanding on who you are and what you've been up to?
Sure. I'm originally from the US and I grew up in the 80s, and Japan always seemed to be in the news, whether it was Nintendo, Karate Kid, or watching the news and seeing companies like Sony or Mitsubishi and Panasonic try to sell products in the US. And that had a really strong impact on me, the Japan bubble. And in the late 90s, I had the opportunity to come to Japan as a high school exchange student with AFS on a scholarship. And that really changed my life, coming from a small town, 10,000 people, to Tokyo with 40 million, and there's 10,000 people on the train. So that really changed my whole viewpoint. And after doing my year, I went back to the States, finished high school, and got a sales job, and became a branch manager for that sales company the following year while going to school full time. And eventually I ended up studying Japanese in college. And as soon as I graduated, I basically found a way to get a job in Tokyo, and I came back here in 2002. So I've been here in Japan now for almost 20 years.
Mm. Excellent. And Andrew's been, Andrew and I have known each other for probably several years now at this point, but we've worked very closely on a variety of projects here in Japan. So again, I want to thank you, Andrew, for taking some time today. Today's.
It's funny you mention that, because actually, just thinking back, there was a press release a couple of years ago about this guy who was taking Japanese businessmen to Macau.
That's
and
right.
I sent you a note, and I was like, well, why are you doing that? And you talked about and it was really to help the Japanese better understand what is an integrated resort, and
Right.
what kind of opportunity does an integrated resort in Japan have for the local businesses.
Yes,
And
I remember that.
you might have a dry cleaner who can basically maybe close down their local shop and just focus on linens and bed sheets or dishes or whatever, or servicing the IR. And
Yeah, I remember that was our first initial introduction to each other.
yeah,
So
yeah, it was. And there are so many.
Mm,
It's been a crazy couple of years, and
it has that it has.
Japan's IR push is moving forward. It is not necessarily at the speed that most Western firms are really used to.
Or anyone would be used to, right? That's true. Today, what I want to talk about today, I mean, as I mentioned, Andrew, you've given a bit of your background. I referred to you earlier as a problem solver because I know that you've worked in a variety of roles, including
Yeah.
in roles around the area of market research. And a lot of our clients at HOGO at the moment, there's a lot of I don't want to say confusion, but unknown. Right.
Yeah.
We, as you know, to focus greatly on the tourism, hospitality, and gaming industry. And as a result of the coronavirus, there are a lot of unknown components with regards to travel, regardless of the country, and whether you're in Macau or Japan or Hawaii, markets that we work in, Thailand. A lot of people are not sure when things will resume to some level of normalcy, if they ever will, as well as what the client base that they're used to servicing is really feeling. So I guess going into the market research aspect of it, how do you see sort of the state of things like market research or other tools that companies can use when it comes to researching and understanding their client base. How do you see that different today as a result of COVID-19 versus say 1.5 years ago? What in your area have you seen as some of the key differences, and how are people approaching understanding the thought process that customers are currently in when they actually don't have a lot of direct connection with those customers at the moment, especially in the travel and tourism industry?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Chris. And I actually just saw a survey today that was done by other researchers across Asia, and I was looking at that earlier this afternoon. So if you look back historically, this kind of situation hasn't happened in about 100 years. And since then, the Spanish flu, and in that 100 years, we've had so many revolutionary technologies, the automobile, plane travel, travel by airplane, and the rise of commercial travel. And you look at the rise of the Asian economy. I just saw a headline this morning or yesterday in one of the newspapers here. Asia as a whole has experienced minus growth for the first time in
right. I did see that.
50 years. And I saw another article by a writer in the Philippines. Manila and the Philippines was growing 5, 6, 7% year on year, and so you had people that were expecting this party to keep going and the growth to keep going. And what COVID has really done is, unlike the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, unlike that, which was a more structural debt-related problem, this has basically this has stopped people from moving debt in their tracks. And so the business, first, if you look back to say the, Chinese New Year and factories shut down in China, and then the lockdown there, that extended. So then that had an impact on components and products that were being made. And so then that affects what it comes into stores. And then as the lockdown spread across the world, that's really had a big impact. There are so many things. It's a weird situation because on one hand, we're a very globalized economy. The phone or the computer that you're using has parts that are made in all of these different countries, and we rely on very complex logistics and transportation networks to make sure that everything comes together and can be made. And so if one piece of that puzzle breaks down, then that's affected. And in relation to the tourism and travel industry, you may have a destination which is, you may have a location where the spread of the virus is relatively low, and there's of course a willingness for the operators to open up. But if the airplanes are not flying in, or coming into this country means you have to go into self-quarantine for 14 days, it really affects one's willingness to travel. And Absolutely. so even if there is the desire, it's a weird time because this is global, and this is affecting everyone. It's affecting people in different ways. The people with money, some are getting wealthier, some are losing. It really depends on what market they're in. But for regular people, they have to make some tough decisions sometimes, and it's putting people under a lot of pressure. I actually had lunch for the first time. I had an outdoor lunch with someone a couple weeks back. I think it was the first time I'd actually eaten out in a restaurant in months.
Right.
And I as a result, I spend probably double what I would normally do on a normal basis because, I've suffered. And so I think when things start coming back, when they do start coming back, the people that can afford to do it, the people that can afford to travel, the people that can afford to go on that vacation, when they do it, they will probably spend more money on things like hotel rooms or food, shopping, because they've suffered and now they're going to make it up to themselves.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense, right? In terms of, as you said, I mean, this sort of lull period where people are sort of pent up, whether it's travel for leisure, whether it's travel for business, regardless. I mean, myself, right? I haven't been in a plane in basically a year come November, and I'm also planning, like, my next business trip when I head to Macau or I head to Hong Kong, I'm going to be staying much longer than I normally would. I'm probably going to be seeing a lot more people than I normally would in a regular trip, where I might instead be going every month or, once every 2 months. So I get that makes a lot of sense. And again, if you're in the industry, and you're waiting for that, I guess, my question to you would also be then, that there is that unknown, and there is also the unknown of, just because there is a travel bubble, or just because there are opportunities for people to travel. In Macau, for example, recently they've opened aspects of the border, right? So initially it was, just with the city of Zhuhai. Then they opened to Guangdong province. In a few days, they're opening to the entire country of China, and they're already discussing, at least in the media, there are discussions around, opening up to visa holders from other countries, visa holders as in working visas, but it's creeping in a direction that means, we're getting there. However, what I think, everyone's well aware of is that open borders doesn't necessarily mean, a free flow of travel, because as you said, there's all these restrictions that will be put into place. There's the sort of mental stigma of not wanting to get sick. There's a lot of people that are, afraid of even just being in large crowds and being stuck in an airport. So if I'm a hotelier or I'm a tourism bureau, what can I be doing right now? And again, if we talk about like the market research aspect, whether it's, a lot of times market research might be focus groups. It might be, post pre-departure or post-arrival surveys at an airport, for example. None of that's happening right now because there's no tourists, and focus groups are few and far between just because of the social distancing aspect. It's not something that's easily done. I'd like to talk a little bit about what some of the other more alternative options are for companies that are, or again, tourism bureaus, whoever, that are looking to reach out to customers and looking to understand what their mentality currently is with regards to travel and the future of their international or overseas travel. Again, when those traditional means of research, if you will, are basically unavailable, what other options, in the digital spectrum in particular, what other options sort of exist? How can they accomplish this?
Yeah. So a lot of this has been happening over the past few years outside of Japan, but even the focus groups have now also gone online as well, even in Japan. And there was a lot of pushback on that initially because Japan is often I have to see someone in order.
I was about to say, for people that don't know, the even in Japan remark is really just around the fact that Japan is incredibly traditional with regards to the way those types, research or, these types of marketing initiatives are very face-to-face encounters. So for it to go digital in Japan is a considerable milestone in the sort of digitization of marketing here.
Yeah. So there are a lot of changes happening here, but a lot of those are also can apply to overseas. So you can do focus groups online. You might need to change the parameters a little bit. For example, overseas, like in the US, oftentimes a focus group might be, say, 8 or 10 people. In Japan, a focus group might be right around 6 people because it takes a little bit more time for respondents to warm up And in the case of online, it might be, you might want to have 4 or 5 max. And depending on the technology platform that you use, there could also be some hurdles in terms of, are the people that you want to talk to, are they tech savvy? So how can you solve that? I know of one firm that actually will prepare all of the equipment that's necessary and send it to people's homes.
I've heard of these types of companies. They're
Yeah.
in the time of COVID, they're really blowing up. They're sending kit. I mean, they're sending professional grade kit, your microphone, everything that you need, right, in order to conduct these types of surveys. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. If you go to your local computer store, you might have a hard time finding webcams or mics.
Right. Absolutely.
It's been stripped bare for a while now. The other thing is, and I wanted to come back to this because it's really important, especially in the digital space. So sometimes when I talk to people, and you can say, research plays into advertising, and Chris, you're in advertising, and oftentimes you talk to people and they're like, oh, you mean research? Oh, you mean like A/B testing? Or, oh yeah, we'll test some ads.
Right.
Here's my beef. Here's my beef with that. You make an assumption, you make a hypothesis, you make 2 different ads, and you run with them. And there are costs to doing those ads in terms of the production. But there's also a cost, whether it could be to your brand, if it doesn't resonate with your customer. And if you just do 2 different ads, you're writing this river of public consciousness, and you're saying, okay, well, here we are now, and we're going to go in 2 different directions, and I'll make 2 different ads, and we'll test which one works, right? The problem is that in the time of COVID, this flow, this public consciousness, it's changing. It could be coming from a completely different direction. It could be coming up, down. My point is that it's really important it's not about what's important for the tourism companies, the hotels and the airlines, but it's really important to understand what is your customer feeling. And it's not just about tour. It might not be about tourism. It might be, someone in my house is sick with something else. For example, I have a family member right now who is going through stage 4 cancer. And
sorry to hear that.
We haven't seen them in months.
Right.
And my wife was really shook up about that. And if COVID wasn't around, we could go see him. We could see him in the hospital. We could take care of him. We could spend his remaining time. We could spend with him, and at least have a few more chances to say goodbye. But now there are a lot of hurdles, and there's a lot of tension or anxiety, right? And it makes everything more complicated. Before he went through chemo, he'd have to get a COVID-19 test, right? Right. So there's a lot of challenges, and it's really important for companies, not just in tourism, but it's really important for companies to really understand what the consumers are feeling.
I totally agree. You talk about, sorry to interrupt, but you talk about in Hawaii, for example, talking to family there, they were mentioning like going to different grocery stores, right? Because right now they're in the middle of a lockdown as of this recording. And there are some grocery stores, for example, where they are, and some larger chains in America, like Costco, for example, where they have created an entire process by which they clean the carts, right? And they make it very visual. So when they're cleaning the carts in front of the store with these chemicals, and they're, have an area for the carts that are not clean, an area for the carts that are, with the, the little tag that says this cart has been, sterilized. And then there are ones that don't do that. There are ones where they don't do anything, or there are ones where it's just, okay, there's the little bottle of alcohol and you go on your way. But again, I think that goes back into, when we talk about the marketing, the market research aspect of execution in this, in terms of what are you trying to learn about the customer, and, what are you then going to use that data for, right? So if one of their biggest fears, with regards to going to the grocery store, is the handling of the carts, right? Or the handling of physical merchandise. What do you do to alleviate that fear, or at least, what do you do to alleviate that fear, and how do you advertise that? And when I say advertise, I don't think they've gone and done the big TVC campaign about how they treat the carts, but what they have done is made it front and center of your walk-in experience, so you see what's happening. So it becomes a very, I'm talking to family, they're like, yeah, I just, to be honest, maybe it doesn't make a difference, we don't know, but we feel so much safer going to store A, because we know they're cleaning everything, versus store B. And this is such a simple thing. It's almost common sense. You're like, well, why wouldn't you do that if you were in an industry where, people are touching things all the time? But again, I guess that goes back to your core point, which is, what are you looking for? Like, what are you trying to achieve with your market research in this case? And how do you expect to use that data, to change and operate? Right now, again, when I talk about market research, I think, I want to be clear. I'm talking about research that will fundamentally change an operator, whatever business, whatever they're in. So, apologies, we had a little technical difficulty. Yeah, but to close that thought, I really think, we want to use research to create actionable, and measurable, meaningful data that I think, companies can utilize. But with regards to digital market research, there's one more final point that I'd like to make and get your feedback on, Andrew, which is, we've spoken to clients about, using digital platforms to conduct market research, right? To understand more about their customers, their needs, their, whether it's a survey, whether it's a focus group, all these different, ways that you can interview and interact with your customers to learn more about their needs. One of the issues in the digital arena is fraud, of course. When we talk about digital advertising, it's click fraud. When we talk about market research, it could be very similar in terms of entry fraud. Ensuring that data that you get is meaningful and is correct. I think everybody can think about times they got surveys where they just click all the way down, and there's no meaningful data there for anybody. So if a company wants to utilize digital market research and they want to, conduct these types of surveys, or conduct these, in-market, focus groups, or specific types of research, what are some of the safeguards that knowing the industry, and being around it, what are the types of things customers should look for? What are the types of things that are built in to digital market research that sort of help to alleviate, fraudulent entries, fraudulent data, and ensure that companies do get sort of, clean data that actually does represent, what the particular group is actually responding with?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things, and I think I've been taking a lot of, as I've switched myself from the more focus group oriented. I was a headhunter for almost 10 years, so I did a lot of in-depth interviews. I mean, headhunting is that's actually how I ended up in market research, is just spending years interviewing clients and candidates and saying like, oh, what does this client need? And then trying to go out into the market and find someone, and like, how can I, not necessarily persuade, but how can you find like the right buttons to, like, does this person have the right skills? And then do they have the willingness to move? And then making that happen. But I wanted to do something a little bit bigger. And what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, when you're recruiting, you help your client, you help your candidate, and you help the company, and you want to help them sell something, whether it's a service or a product or whatever. But what I like about research is helping bring new things to market. So I helped a big technology company a few years ago, and they introduced a product worldwide, including Japan. And the environment here is so different that the mandates that were coming down from headquarters really didn't fit into the market. So it was really important to help the clients from headquarters come. And we actually visited people's homes, and they got to see how people lived. And you'd have people that's like, yeah, this entire house is as big as my bedroom, right? So really it's really important to get into the consumer's head. So coming back to your question, as far as like digital market research, anytime you're giving something of value, right, whether it's points in a video game or a gift card or digital money, or any time that there's something like that, there are going to be people that want to game the system. And so what you need to do is work with a vendor that has those safeguards and has ways to detect, and has ways to keep quality high, has ways to detect issues, and takes very proactive steps in order to fulfill those.
Filter out, right?
Yeah. I think the other thing you have to, so there are a couple of, and I don't want to give away all the secrets, of course.
Of course.
One thing is, you use common sense. If someone can't answer a question that someone is supposed to know that's within your domain, or they answer it so fast that it just kind of defies credibility, then those are the kinds of things that you'd say, I don't think this person can provide good value.
Right.
And I don't think that's reasonable data.
Anomalies on either end of the spectrum, basically.
Yeah.
Finding ways to remove those or to filter those.
Exactly. So I recently started working with Response AI, which is a platform. And they started in 2016 in Prague. They were a traditional market research firm, and they were working with a local office for a very large and well-known global consulting firm. And the consulting firm principal said, hey, we always love your work, we love what you do, but it always takes time, like even the survey work takes time to go through the results, and that time costs a lot of money. And they said, hey, can we find a way to automate some of these parts? So there are actually 3 parts to a quantitative survey. You have the making your questionnaire, fielding your questionnaire, and then the last part is taking the results and making your report and presentation.
Right.
And what Response AI platform actually does is we actually connect all 3 of those parts, and we streamline what we can, we automate what we can, and we also, the output is a PowerPoint, so if someone needs to edit it, it is editable. Manage. So
makes sense.
Yes. And there is, of course, there's also, it's a very flexible platform. So some of the firms that we work with are advertising clients, and they use it to test ads, and they're doing this every month. They're testing new ads, and that's very, very simple. I'm working on a project right now. A company has an existing product, and they want to bring a new product to the market, and that would totally change the way that the consumer views that entire product category.
Right.
And it would also change the way that it would also change some of the relationships that customers have right now in that space. So this client is a manufacturer, and the customer has a very good relationship with the middleman,
Right.
but doesn't have any. There is no real branding or awareness.
Direct to consumer. Right.
Yeah, this client wants to kind of help change that conversation and make it so their product is something that customers will ask for by name.
Excellent.
So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that is.
And I think that sometimes I hear things like, oh, can you trust the research? Well, we have ways to make sure that, data integrity is there. Right. And sometimes people say, oh, it takes too long. I'm talking to a firm right now. They do have an internal research team. And when they came to us, they said, yeah, they're always 2 months behind. I actually had a conversation last night with someone who said, I need a ballpark figure. What can you do? How much will it cost?
Right.
And how long will it take?
Right.
And I talked to my colleagues and I said, well, we can get this is what I understand. I think if we can get your questionnaire done in a short amount of time, it's that ball's in your court, but it might take 2 days, it might take 2 weeks, right. But hopefully they're under the gun, so hopefully it would be pretty quick. And then maybe 5 or 7 days out in field, and then we would get them a report, and then we could do all of our checks and put together a report.
The final component.
So I think we could get that wrapped up in about 2 weeks. And that's really where the Response AI
and the automation, exactly. The automation, the speed at which digital research potentially has in terms of fulfilling the research need in a potentially a short period of time. Obviously, depending on the needs of a particular client, the markets, what they're looking to achieve, it's a complete custom job. But I get it that it's much faster than the old school way of, okay, now we got to go find focus groups. So that's very useful. Look, I want to wrap it up just by saying, again, sure. First I want to thank you very much for taking the time today, Andrew. Again, for the audience, I think it's important that we look, people understand or brands, companies understand that, even though, you may be in an industry where you feel that you can't connect with your customers in person or directly today. There are always ways to reach out and find, connect with your existing customers, connect with customers in the demographic, psychographic market segments that you're looking to reach. Even in this time of social distancing and COVID-19, there are still options. And, Andrew, we've gone a bit over our 5-minute marketing norm. So this is probably a 30-minute marketing piece, which I'm very happy to run over because, again, I think there's a lot of interesting meat there. And I think it's quite useful for our clients to understand a bit more. So if you'd like more information, we're going to leave Andrew's email down below and contact information, if he's okay with it, below us here in the YouTube box. So, and of course, as always, feel free to comment, the video. We look forward to hearing your feedback. And we're looking forward to another video very soon. Andrew, thank you so much for your time with us today, and we look forward to chatting again in the future. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.